Hi,
Hello.
I'm Julian.
I'm creepy dude in the woods pointing at somewhere. Tom.
We are Team Binge. We are here to talk about Severance, Season 2, Episode 4. This one is called Woe's Hollow. And Tom, there was some creepy wood stuff in this episode. I know that we tend to be critical. In fact, most of the shows that we watch we hate, but I really enjoyed this episode. I was a little bit scared in the beginning, not because of what I was watching, but because of what I thought they were going to do with the episode. But as it went on and went on and went on, I enjoyed it more and more and more. And that may have just been the bourbon, but I enjoyed this episode. Tom, what about you?
I don't know what to think of this episode. I feel like it was not a bottle episode, obviously, right? Because we moved the characters along and obviously had a big reveal at the end, but it was just kind of slower. I love the idea of taking our characters out of, especially our any characters, right? Out of the severed floor and out of the fluorescent tube lighting of an office and now out into the wilderness, but still just a massive, big, white, open area. It was fun, but yeah, I feel like it was a little bit slow for me and kind of took some time to kind of get to the crescendo they had at the end.
Sure, sure. You're cold walking around, and then the episode slowly warms you up with blue tents, torches, and fire. So,
Yeah.
yeah, let's talk through it. What I thought was interesting is we left last episode with such a big moment where it looks like Mark is going to be reintegrated, but then they totally ignore that in this episode. There's maybe one spot that's a little bit of a glimmer, but we don't pick up where we left off necessarily. To your point, it's not a bottle episode, but a tundra episode. You know, we start in the middle of a frozen lake. So, were you surprised that we didn't pick up with the reintegration?
Well, that's going to be my question, right? Because timing-wise, when is this? Because we do get Milchik saying, like, we got permission from your Audis for this, like, overnight adventure here. So was it potentially before Mark got it? It can't be before he got reintegrated, right? Like, I don't really know.
I don't think
really know
time
where
matters when you're severanced. I don't think time is real. We've seen Milchik lie about, the 5-month delay. I don't think it matters inside. I mean, this could be like Inception. This could be a dream within a dream within a dream, I don't know. But I just think that Seth Milchik is a liar and that time doesn't matter when you're severed. So
I'm with you about the time. I just think in general, if Mark really did get reintegrated, then I'm with you. Like, this should have been him knowledgeable of this, but I guess it does take some time. But the way they ended that last episode of him, like, going in and out of consciousness and the two different, like, dressed guys on the table, I would assume he would have known a lot more and not just get that flash of Gemma's face we get later. But
well, if you're reintegrated, can you be severed again?
it's an existential question. I don't know. I think you're always severed, right? Like, you just have the ability to see both sides.
So what? This is like timey-wimey stuff that when we get into and the brain starts to hurt. I don't know, Tom. Let's address these questions as we go through the episode, I guess.
Perfect.
The first thing I wanted to point out is I did watch the recap, and one of the things they mentioned was the 4 principles of tempers. Sorry, and so they are woe, frolic, dread, and malice. I did not know how to spell woe, so our outline was riddled with, as you pointed out, Joey Lawrence references.
Whoa! Incredible.
I believe that's the right one. And there's many Joeys that say whoa. I kind of thought Keanu Reeves, but different Joey. Anyways, and that comes into play because this whole episode is Woe's Hollow, and there seems to be this forest tale that Milchik reads from Egan's that has to deal specifically with woe. And so I don't know if there's more to dig into what woe means. We've seen frolic tattooed on that guy's hand, and they've talked about these before, but I didn't know. Did you feel like they brought these 4 things back in the recap? Was it just to remind us that woe was one of them, or did you feel like it had to do with something else?
I feel like there's definitely some deeper meaning with this, like, because we see these things reintroduced multiple times. Like when he had the waffle party, you had like 4 incarnations of all of these with like the guy in the goat head, the bride, all the different people. And like the fact that it's 4 and we have 4 main people in the office, I'm like, well, do the innies represent some of these in some form or fashion? I think there's plenty of theory crafting you can kind of do on this, and I don't know if we've done enough to maybe speak directly to it, but these are certainly themes that we are continuing to dive deeper in. And I do think it has something to do with macroeconomics, right? And the buckets they're putting stuff into and maybe trying to rebuild Egan's consciousness. That's still kind of where my head goes.
That's still your theory. Okay. To your point, we go from an office and the show is like, hey, hold my drink. I'm going to put you in the biggest wide open space possible if an office is too claustrophobic. So we wake up. No one knows where they're at. We're on a frozen lake tundra. Everyone's dressed like they're in Anna Karenina. I love those hats, by the way, and those jackets. No one looked cold in those jackets. I'll just say that. And the whole group's together. We're all yelling at each other, and I guess they have no recognition of where they're at, and it's very confusing both for audience and you feel for the characters because they don't know what's going on.
Yeah, I love the comedy of Irv being like way down in the middle of the lake, and somehow Mark has already made his way to the top, and he's screaming like, "I have no idea why we're here." It's good.
Right. My wife was like, "Why doesn't Mark go down to them? He makes everyone hike up to him." I was like,
Right.
"Yeah, well, Mark's the leader, I guess." So, but we find out this is some sort of we find out it's like a team building exercise. I thought it was maybe a trust exercise. I don't know if those are the same things, but we find this old school TV set on the cliff. All I could think about was like, oh, they've got a substitute teacher, and the teacher has rolled in the TV cart, and they're going to play some movie that no one wants to watch while that's
some VHS.
Yeah. Oh, Sound of Music time again, kids. Mrs. So-and-so is sick.
I love when Milchek does pop up on the screen. It's like, hey, it's Milchek from work.
And it's weird. It's like heavily edited. Like he keeps like almost like glitching on the video, which all of these things are for a deeper internet dive that I just don't have time for. But I'm sure there is some theory crafting as to like, was Milchek, did he know he was making this video, or did they just take a bunch of clips of him, like put them together to make this weird introduction to this outdoor team building retreat? And they find out they're in Dieter Egan's National Forest, and it feels like no one knows who Dieter Egan is based on their reactions to the name, right?
Yeah, because I guess he wasn't featured in that Hall of Egans that they went to in the first season. So yeah, he's a new character here we're finding out about.
Right. And Milchek mentions that there's a 4th appendix that was written on Egan's deathbed, which I gotta say, as a religious studies major, it's never good when your prophet writes a deathbed appendix. It just it's never aligned. You gotta kind of like work it back in. Just stick with the stuff when they're healthy and within the right mental capacity. The deathbed religious documents are never great.
Yeah, that's a fair point. And he does make mention, like, is this where he gained the 4 tempers? So, like, this is like the origin story, I guess, of this. I didn't know how to take that.
I don't know. Woe, frolic, dread, and malice all seem like the 4 things you go through before you die. You're like, whoa, I'm dying. And then you're like, man, I really miss frolicking. And then you're like, oh, I dread dying. And then I'm angry at all of the rest of you for staying alive, malice. So I think you hit them all right there as
Perfect.
you're dying, right? Isn't that what grief counselors teach you? They're like, you have to go through the 4 stages of grief: woe, frolic, dread, and malice. And everyone's like, I don't think those are the right ones.
I like how you end in malice. That's good.
Yeah, you know what? You're angry because everyone else is gonna watch you die, and all you have to do is cross over to the great mystery. He has some talk about like staying on the path and like beware of nature's wrath. It all rhymed and was super creepy. I love the actor that plays Milchek. He does just
So good.
He's so good at just being quietly menacing and just super mysterious. And we see those moments. Even in the recap, they showed him getting the balloons and like being upset. So he's got to like put on this face, but you can also tell that he doesn't know exactly what's going on or isn't aligned with management. I don't know.
I kind of had some thoughts about Milchek here, right? Because we talked about him potentially showing signs of breaking when they kind of remade those images in him.
Right.
But he seems to be very much like a company man. And later on, he talks about, yes, this is all the truth. And I don't know, is he just fully buying into it? Is
Well,
there
to your
more?
point, we don't know the timeline on this. So this
Yeah.
could have been outside of when he's given the repainted paintings. So to your point, he is definitely a company man in this episode.
Yeah.
All right, this brings us to the weird pointing, the twins pointing. Tom, I'm going to give you the floor. This was creepy, and these aren't like exact replicas. There's just something a little bit off because we have Mark pointing at one point, we have a Helly pointing at one point, we have Dylan pointing. I did not like this. I did not like the weird, creepy twinning in the forest. What was
It
happening here?
was. Yeah, and did you get kind of callbacks to the first episode, right? Remember when Mark was like running through the hallways and there's seemingly a guy in the hallway behind him when he finally kind of stops in that, I can't remember what the room was when he was trying to find Gemma, but there was like somebody dressed in the same suit and we couldn't tell the face, but he kind of like peeks in and then peeks out. I'm wondering if this is like a call to these twins and like the idea that we get later and realize that Kier had a twin, it's his Dieter character. Or the way I read it when they first showed the book is Dieter, so I thought it was just a diet book. Are these like I get it for the concept of like tying in that story in this appendix book we're gonna get to, but are these people real? Like, do they actually exist? Because to your point, they looked like them enough, but they weren't them. They almost looked like they had like masks of the person on. I mean, I still think they're real people. I don't think they were wearing physical masks, but they just look so odd and creepy and like almost hunched over in points. I just don't know what to take of this.
I don't know either. And as I pointed out in the last episode, I don't like a show that just keeps giving you more mystery. And as we were slowly treading through the tundra, I was kind of like, come on, like, let's go somewhere. I'm back in, baby. I don't care what these twins are. Like, they were creepy and weird. And this episode rocked. So I give me as many mysteries as you'd like to feed me, Ben Stiller. I will remain confused. And so to answer your question, Tom, I don't know. They were almost like golems of themselves. I don't think they had like personalities or that they were real.
Because there is talk and like theory crafting, I think, out there of like maybe like with all the goats, maybe they're cloning people, and then to your point, they're shells of the people, but they're trying to do whatever they're doing in macro data refinement to give them back their memories or consciousness in some form or fashion. Because you could almost argue like Gemma is kind of like that, right? When she was working with Mark in the first season, she didn't seem like fully baked, I guess.
That's fair. That's fair. So is this just one big cloning program? Is that what we're supposed to be assuming?
I mean, I feel like as watchers, they haven't given us anything. I mean, all these people have chips in their head, right? And we know that there's a bunch of these different protocols they can do to make them either stop or freeze the chip or switch the severed, whatever. So maybe they can make them hallucinate and see a version of themselves, but they seem to all see it. So I don't think there's anything in here that's telling us what we are seeing with these extra people, I mean, are not real. Like the show is telling us they are real. And that's a pretty big addition.
Okay, then let's ask this. Are they truly in a weird tundra in the middle of nowhere? Or is this they've just transferred their consciousness like you would in The Matrix, the movie, not like an actual Matrix organization?
I mean, my assumption is they actually did take them somewhere, but maybe to your point, like Irv spends the night just huddled up under a rock and somehow survives. It doesn't seem like that would have happened. It seemed pretty cold.
Well, how do they get their bodies there? Did they put their bodies on a dolly and they reel them out, and then like Irv, they just like tipped him over in the middle of that frozen lake, and then they ran off and they were like, "Oh, fire him up," and then I don't know. Now I'm super confused about all of it. You know what? I'm back. I want answers. I don't want more mystery. Ben Stiller. Sir, please send me answers. Dear Ben Stiller, sweet, sweet Lord, please send me answers. They eventually crawl through a cave, as one does on a forest quest, and they find
I was
a
really
book.
hoping this would be a dark reference. They're going to start following some sort of like timey-wimey cave.
Oh yeah, they're gonna find like the golden snitch that sends them back and forth between times because of a
Yeah.
nuclear power plant. That show's great. If you haven't watched Dark on Netflix, go watch Dark. Oh, and learn German because it's better in the original German. So this is Appendix 4, which you talked about. This is the deathbed confessional. And as you pointed out, we find out that Dieter was a twin of Kier and that they had some sort of experience. It's like a parable or a life story of his where we're supposed to learn something from it. And it happened in Woe's Hollow. And I did not like the phrasing of spilt his lineage upon the soil. I wrote it down. I thought about it for a while and thought, well, I guess maybe this is a show for children because no one's going to know what that means.
Yeah.
But
They really softened it up quite a bit. And I guess this is what Helly is referencing later, right by the fire.
Right. Which, in passing, you're like, they don't mean what they think they mean when they say that. But then she confirms it later, which I feel like is just good story writing. All right, so now that we have the book, we continue. There was a lot of walking through the woods where I was like, all right, let's go. It was still menacing, but now we have the book, and we also have Irv watching the interactions between Mark and Helly. And so he is noticing that there is a closeness there.
Yeah, he's been suspicious, I think, right ever since Helly kind of told her backstory.
So did you take this as suspicion of, hey, is there a love developing between these two or a relationship developing? Or did you take it as suspicious because he doesn't know what's going on with Helly? Because he does bring up the night gardener, I think, when he talks with her in this moment.
Yes. I think he's not as suspicious with Mark or necessarily the relationship. I don't think Irv as a character would care as much if they were in a relationship. I think he is more suspicious of Helly throughout this when she kind of told her backstory. And I do appreciate the bringing back of the night gardener because I feel, that should be a CBS sitcom or some sort of horror movie.
Yeah.
It's just too good.
Kevin James is back as the night gardener. Due to some sort of eye issue, he only gardens at night. He's also married to someone who's way too attractive for him. On CBS at 11:30 a.m. Watch it, kids, when you're homesick from school. Yeah, no, that's an incredible show. I'm green light it right now, CBS. Okay, speaking of dead seals, they argue over one. Did this look like a dead seal to you? Were you immediately like, oh, that's a dead seal? Or did it just look like a big lump of something?
It took me a while because I started at the face and I couldn't make out what it was. But then I think when they eventually leave the scene, you kind of see the tail and maybe this is a seal. But all the reactions are just wild to me. Like Irv screaming, I want to eat it. And then Mark saying maybe this is just what dead things look like. Like, is he still that naive as an innie that he doesn't understand what a dead body would be?
Well, have they experienced death as innies? Like, isn't the consciousness kind of like they are of a child because they just have not had any life experience outside of the office? So that's where I took that, and I thought, oh, that's kind of interesting. But yeah, Irv wanting to eat this, I found this very, very surprising. And when he was like, oh, I call the neck, I was like, oh, that's a weird to like choose a body part of the seal you wanted to. And do seals even really have necks? I don't know.
Yeah.
Tom, what part of the seal would you have eaten first?
Ooh, that's a good question. Ear, probably.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. You? Tail?
Definitely the tail. Yeah. That's where all the nutrients are from them swimming. Milch shows up. And who does wardrobe for this show, Tom?
Oh, it's so good. Like him coming in, like all of our main characters dressed in black, and then him kind of coming in white as kind of like the boss or whatever is just so cool.
Once again, someone from a Dostoevsky novel. I'm sure I said that wrong. He looks fantastic. And if only he would have been in like a sled that polar bears were dragging, he would have been the White Queen from Narnia. Would have been great. All right. So then he tells the story, and Oh, no, 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 no. This is where he's talking about the twins, and we see their twins above the waterfall, and he has some throwaway line about this is the biggest waterfall in the world.
I love that.
That was great. And so I think this is the moment where we get maybe a better close-up on those four people, and they're all waving like robots, or once again, people inside of people bodysuits.
Right.
I could not tell you what the whole twin thing is.
Yeah, I don't get it. My assumption is these are real beings that live here on this planet, but I don't know what to take of them, and they were super creepy.
Is this some sort of, like, as a team building exercise, is this supposed to, like, connect them innie and outie? Is this supposed to make them realize, like, hey, you have a twin on the outside, you should take care of it?
Well, but their twins are dressed like they're innies, right? So they're essentially seeing themselves. Like, they don't see themselves dressed in these, normal day-to-day clothes that their outies would be wearing.
Tom, I love the fact that I keep asking you these things as if you're going to be like, oh, yeah. I talked to Ben, and this is what's happening. I'm just so confused. I appreciate you being my sounding board.
I try.
Tom, just remember that Lumen will always protect and provide. Always.
Yep, our work is mysterious, but it's important.
Mysterious and great. Speaking of mysterious and great, we now have tents, fire, a variety of meats, and torches. He says something about the meats that I was like, oh, no one talks about meats that way. He's like, we have some gourmet meats by the fire. I don't know what he meant, but man, it sounded real delicious. And also, Tom, important for all of us, 4-ply toilet paper.
And I'm assuming each ply representing one of the tempers, correct?
Yes, that is correct. I'm a 2-ply man, but as a Lumen guy, I'm eventually going to become a 4-ply. Also, Miss Huang shows up, and I've got questions. Where is Miss Huang's parents? How is she out in the forest? Just, I don't know, wandering around. Was there tents for them? They seem to show up out of nowhere. Or did Milch have a tent?
At one point, you do see in the background like a white pyramid-looking thing. So I think they had their own tent, but it wasn't as obvious.
Sure. Okay. So many questions about whether or not we're in the real world. All right. Helly shows up to talk to Irv, and I'm assuming this is kind of a, hey, we had an awkward conversation. I'm extending the olive branch, and this olive branch is a snow seal.
Mm-hmm.
And he won't drop it, so he asks her again what she did during the overtime contingency. And something happens with Helly's face here that I don't know if it was just incredible acting, but there is like it's almost like the face changes and we get Helena and then we're back to Helly. It's like this actress is phenomenal. Whatever she's doing here, just, I don't know. It freaked me out. It was so good.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it was very reminiscent of me of like Milch and Natalie kind of having their conversation where they're just doing so much with their eyes and small little facial movements. It just says so much. There was a quick little, and I think they have it at the end of every episode, like a quick recap from like the showrunners and some of the actors kind of talking about some of these sequences. And obviously we get the reveal that she's Helena at the end, and Adam Scott kind of talks about, now that you know that knowledge, you can go back and watch Helly kind of interacting with the rest of the innies and seeing her subtle little facial movements and things like that, which I think kind of tip you off. And I do think we did clock, at least I did. I know you were against my theory, but I think I clocked quite a few of those moments where she seemed much more in the Helena camp than Helly.
Okay, so are we saying from like season 2 on, this was always Helena down there? Or
Correct.
Was it sometimes Helly?
No, it's always been Helena. Like, and I think there's even like a little nod when they're all going down the elevator.
You're right. I don't like when you're right. It's one of the worst things in the world.
When they're all going down the elevator, like I think at the end of episode 2, and it kind of did that sequence where it kind of lined up with episode 1 where the innies and outies kind of meeting each other. All of the people go down the elevator, like it makes a dinging noise, but when she goes down, like it doesn't ding, it doesn't make a noise. So the thought being whatever's in her chip or whatever, her Severance chip doesn't flick on, so she stays Helena.
Okay.
So, a lot of cool little Easter egg things like that, but
so many details, Tom. Who's got the time? Who's got the time? But the guy that's catching on to the details is Irv, and he
Mm-hmm.
continues to be suspicious. And I wrote it somewhere in the outline, but I'll say it here because I'm going to say it multiple times. John Turturro, or I'm sure I'm mispronouncing his last name. He's so good as Irv. Like
Yes.
he, even at the end of this episode, he just is so compelling, and he's doing so many things. I mean, other than the drowning, trying to drown someone, that's not great. But as an actor, he's just phenomenal in this.
He's incredible. And I feel like we haven't seen him obviously cook much this season. He had some really great scenes with our man, Christopher Walken last season. So it was cool to see him kind of do his thing here because he's absolutely incredible.
Yeah, the back end of this episode is him, and it's great. We have story time around the fireplace, so Milch is reading from 4, and did not care for this story time around the fireplace. This is not something I would have enjoyed. This was
to me, it
freaky.
like read more like a ghost story, right? Like submitted for the approval of the Midnight Society kind of a thing. But you got to appreciate Miss Wong's theremin playing. I mean, that's just the perfect instrument for this scene.
I'm unfamiliar with what you're talking about. What is a theremin?
You don't know what a theremin is?
No.
It's the thing where it's like you don't touch anything. It's like wavelengths, and then it makes noises. So there's just like almost looks like a half of a keyboard, and then like a metal pole that stands up there. And based on where you put your hands around that, the wavelengths will make these like eerie, creepy sounds. And she played the heck out of it.
Okay, I don't. Tom, I may have been bourbon or two deep at this point, so I did not notice the theremin. I will go back. I will rectify this and go back. We find out that Dieter met a gruesome end. He became some sort of tree. He was turned into Helly makes a joke that he got turned into a tree for, we'll just call it spilling his something. I don't know.
Self-gratification purposes.
Sure, there you go. That's a good way of putting it. There's some choice words being said by Milch in terms of just like this goes from like a fairy tale to super dark and weird, which all of this Kier like religion stuff is. So I'm fascinated to know where this goes. I hope it's just like nonsense I hope it's not just nonsense for nonsense in terms of hey how silly religion is, but I don't know. This was this was a strange story time.
Yeah, some of it to me is almost reminiscent of am I blanking on his name? What's the brother that wrote the book? Rickon. I feel like some of it's kind of like Rickon-esque, where it's just like poetic sounding, but it is kind of gobbledygook sometimes.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And something about Kier and a nanny, and I didn't write down word for word what the story was, Tom. In fact, I think my brain dumped it because it was so weird.
Yeah.
And it needs room for other things.
Bourbon.
Exactly. And to your point, Milchek once again doubles down on drinking the Kool-Aid, which is actually a very appropriate saying for this whole drinking the Kool-Aid. He's like, every word is truth, and this is around the time Helly laughs.
Yeah, again, I just don't know. Like, is he really all in? Because I would assume he is here. We still have kind of signs of cracking, but he exists in both worlds, but he's not... I mean, they haven't showed us he's severed, right? Like, Milchek is just a guy that works and goes both ways in terms of the inside and outside world. But I don't know. It almost seems like he is severed if he is having these doubts when he got the paintings. I don't know.
Right. He's disappointed in Helly's response. And as one does when you're around a campfire and someone disappoints you, you throw all the marshmallows in the fire, and those marshmallows have Kier's name printed on them. So you got to hope that ink was edible. Otherwise, they all dodged a bullet.
Oh, that wasn't his name, man. That was his face. But the way Milchek does this and tells like this Fog to like grab the marshmallows, throw them in the fire. They're for team players. Like, just so incredibly done. I love it.
Oh, it was great. And it reminds you of all the times your kids disappoint you and you react pretty irrationally. And you're like, fine, if you guys don't want this, it's all going away. And then you like break their Xbox in front of them. And then you're like, well, now I have to go shell out $300 for a new Xbox for these dumb kids. Anyways.
It's worth the lesson.
Yes, worth the lesson. And that's why you always leave a note. All right. Irv makes some comment about this point after the marshmallows are all burned. Irv is like, "Hey, I don't want to see any more goo goo eyes between you and Helly," and then he tells the rest of the group like Helly's acting weird or something strange because of the night gardener. Right? This is Irv kind of laying this all out.
Yeah, Thursday nights on CW6.
Kevin James is the night gardener. Irv just holds court here, and everyone else is like trying to get him to calm down, but he is pointing out all the things that are strange,
Which are all very fair, but it eventually kind of comes like, yeah, okay, apparently it's 3 against 1, because I don't like Irv and Dylan had a lot of like back and forth here about like Dylan maybe betraying him, but I don't know if there's that much betrayal really going on between them, but they kind of make it seem like Dylan did something to cause the pain of Irvin here.
Right. I think it's because maybe he shared things with Dylan, and so he feels Dylan should be an ally, but Dylan is kind of holding back now because he wants the family visitation. But we don't know where in place this... Well, see, at the end of this episode, they know that Helly is Helena. So this has got to be after everything else that's happened in the show. I
agree. I think it's sequential, yeah.
Okay. Well, at least I got there, right? There are people listening to us right now just screaming. I can feel their hate. Please don't email me at teambingepodcast@gmail.com because I will forward them right on to Tom. Irv, really cutting here, says something like, "You're making googly eyes while your wife rots," which not great for Mark. And also, I guess Mark doesn't know Miss Casey. Hey, I did it. I almost said Miss Chase, but I said Miss Casey. That's
well done.
That's growth, right?
You did it great. We did misspeak on that last episode, so we apologize.
I'm not apologizing for anything, Tom. Helly fights back here with bringing up memories of Bert, and that cuts even deeper. So this team building exercise has really turned into a let's see who can cut deeper exercise. And we all kind of retreat to, well, the other team retreats to their tents. And is this about the time where Irv grabs a torch and he's like, "I'm going into the forest. I'm having a little Irv time"?
He's having a walkabout, yep.
Then we find ourselves in the tent with Mark and Helly, and he starts this off with a strong joke about Dieter's carrot, which, strong opener, Mark. And he's in the tent, and it gets real romantic, Tom. It gets real romantic, and I just kept thinking, okay, so this Mark doesn't know Gemma, so how should we feel in this moment? Are we rooting for Mark and Helly?
Gemma, right? Like he knows that he's trying to help his outie find information about his wife, right? Because they mentioned doing this in the first,
but she was never his wife, right?
Yeah, and I think and we get that from him a little bit later. Not to jump ahead, but like when Helena kind of opens up a little bit more, essentially Mark is like, "I don't care. Like that's a different thing than what me and you have. I don't care what you did in the past. I don't care, about the other stuff. I'm still going to try to help my outie, but we are still a thing."
I looked it up, Tom. The good book still says this is adultery, so
okay.
I'm not for it.
Okay.
That's where I land on it.
You checked the rule book?
I checked the rule book, God's rule book, and he said no. All right, so does Adam Scott's hair not look like a wig to you? It feels like he had to film something else and they plopped this like emo wig on him. And I was like, oh no, the wig's going to fall off during coupling. What's happening here?
I'm going to give him a hat head for this. I haven't really clocked it as much as you have, but maybe wearing that big poofy black beanie thingy, maybe that gave his hair a more disheveled look.
Okay. I love a good erotic thriller, Tom, and we have just the most erotic of thrillers happening as Irv is working his way through the dark forest with a CGI torch. We're cutting back and forth with Mark and Helly, but I guess Helena, coupling. Well, the space heater, this was very like Blade Runner 2049-esque shooting. It looked great. I just I don't know. This was an interesting. This Hell episode had kind of a different visual feel to it.
It definitely did. But like, yeah, the orange glow of this while they're in this room, and I felt like they were way too close to the space heater. I also don't know if a space heater is a very safe thing to have in a tent, but
Nope.
I don't know.
It is not, because you will get carbon, I think, dioxide poisoning. I don't know. Monoxide? Who knows? I'm not a scientist. I just know you need it in a well-ventilated area, Tom. Unless this was an electric one, then maybe you're okay.
I'm more concerned about my tent going on fire than I am
Oh, okay.
the invisible
All right.
poison.
Yeah, you don't need oxygen. You're fine without
Yeah.
oxygen. You just don't want to die by fire. I gotcha. All right. As people that have watched way too much Alone, we know that putting a heating thing near your tent or structure typically goes poorly. All right. They have a very obviously intimate moment, but I would argue the conversation gets even more intimate, where she says something like, I didn't like who I was on the outside, and I was ashamed of who I was, because I think he actually does ask her like about it.
Okay, so I got a question for you here.
Yeah.
Is this Helena talking, or is this Helly talking? Like, is Helena saying, now that I've kind of seen this footage, I'm ashamed of who I was there, or is she still trying to play the game and pretend that she's Helly?
Well, you told me that now this is always Helena whenever
Yes.
we're in these moments. So, but this would be a Helly phrase of I was ashamed. She found out she was an Egan. She was ashamed. But is the real Helena also ashamed of being an Egan? I don't know. If I took what you said earlier on face value, this is Helena the whole time. But if they are like switching her on and off, which would be super confusing.
No, I don't think they are. Like, the fact that they, like, Milch at the end, like, does that specific protocol, the Glasgow block, which we'll get to, like, it's a specific thing. So she's always been Helena here.
All right. The good book also says that's against the rules. So I checked that as well. Mark is like, hey, if it bothers you, like, don't share too much. And then he twitches in and out, almost like...
Well, he sees Gemma in her face. Like, he kind of rolls over, and as he's looking down at her, like, Helly's face or Helena's face changes
I didn't
to
catch
Gemma.
that. I must have been taking a note. Okay,
so I think this is
important.
like the call into the reintegration kind of bit. Yeah.
I have so many questions about reintegration. All right. All of that, I'm sure the internet was like thrilled, because I think people ship for things. Is that a phrase? I believe that's a phrase, right, Tom?
Sure. Yeah.
I think people wanted Mark and Helly to end up. But knowing it's Helena, does that make it stranger?
Makes it weird. Makes it weird how Mark is going to react to that afterwards. Is going to be interesting.
Yeah. Now I just don't want to. Now I'm just confused and kind of, honestly, kind of sad. All right. Speaking of confused and sad, Irv is alone in the woods. He eventually finds himself in like a business suit, right?
I think this is like essentially starts his nightmare sequence where he's laying by the rock and then he kind of wakes up and he's in his suit. He sees the desks. There's moths at his screen. Bert opens up one of them and we finally get to see a good Christopher Walken giving like a little smirk or smile, which was great. And then this super creepy half-size lady typing away on her keyboard.
Oh, this is the girl from The Ring. She grew up and she got a job at an office as an office drone. And so she goes by Woe and she works at Lumen. That's exactly who this is. She actually looks a little bit better now that she's grown up. But that's all I could think about is like, oh, it's the girl from The Ring, and she sold out and took an office job for the benefits.
And she was like obviously very creepy in like the makeup and the strands of hair kind of rimming down her face. But like I felt like what made it the most creepy was her like aspect ratio essentially to everything else, and how she was kind of like half the size of like a normal person. It was just very off-putting.
Oh, yeah. Very weird. He then wakes up, and to your point, he seems to have survived the night without a fire or anything to warm him, and seems to be fine. They all wake up in their various tents, but Helly and Irv are missing, and this leads to the confrontation at the waterfall, where Irv finally comes to the conclusion that, hey, Helly was a lot of things, but she was never cruel. You're not
Yeah.
Helly.
That was a great line.
Oh, such a great line. And then I wrote there's a struggle at the waterfall, but in thinking back, it's really just Irv trying to drown her.
Yeah.
A struggle makes it like they got into a tussle together. It was more like Irv just attacked her. And
pretty
nice
brutal.
way of saying attempted drowning, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
He jumps to the conclusion that she's an outie and she's an Egan. I felt without much evidence. Like, if I started acting weird, Tom, would you immediately try and drown me and be like, he's an outie, he's an Egan, or I don't know, whatever the equivalent of an Egan is these days?
I mean, probably not immediately. Eventually I'd get there, but...
After my body was limp under the water, you'd be like, definitely an outie. You're trying to like justify it to the police. You're like, guys, he's an outie and he's also a musk, so I had to do it. Like
a musk. But it was, yeah, I mean, it was, I feel like it was kind of a showism just to be able to kind of point those two together, because he kind of makes the idea of like, well, nobody, like you have to have a certain amount of power to be able to come down here unsevered.
Sure.
So says she has to be an Egan. So yeah, it was kind of quick. But like the way that, I love the way it was shot, where her like trying to catch her breath when he pulls her head out of the water and just screaming, "Seth, do it," because we've already kind of confirmed that none of these people know Milchek's first name. So
right.
It's like boom, calls it out right there, and then telling him to do it. You're like, what does that mean? And then yeah,
he gets on the radio. These are the best radios that anyone's ever used. They work perfectly in the middle of nowhere. And then Helly is back, and she is obviously woken up to be half drowned by Irv.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where the reference to the Glasgow block being removed is made.
Yeah, and so I went back and looked at some of the screenshots when they were doing what was the original protocol, overtime protocol?
Protocol, yeah.
Yeah, so when they're doing that, there was a bunch of other names on the screen, and Glasgow was one of them. So obviously I'm sure there's maybe significance of it, and maybe the internet will tell us what Glasgow means and why that would block her from being able to be her innie. But some of the other things that are listed on there are beehive, branch transfer, clean slate, elephant, and freeze frame. So I feel like branch transfer, like maybe we have seen that, right? Because we saw the other people kind of come and try to be with Mark in that first episode.
Right.
Clean slate is maybe what's going to happen to Irv at the end of this, with he's kind of fired. And then freeze frame, I think, just makes sense, where you can literally just freeze the person where they are. So we haven't seen some of these other ones, but...
elephant is where they get crushed by an elephant.
Yeah, sure. Beehive where they get attacked by bees. Yeah, sure.
You're just like typing away, and all of a sudden an Oliphant chomps in and steps on your face.
Oh, goodness.
Yep. It's a promotion. All right, speaking of getting promoted, Irv's getting fired. And once again, just... Irv, John, doing a great job acting. I enjoyed this. He like takes a moment to try and encourage Dylan to like stay the course, and then he is sent off into the forest by Milchek.
Well, before he gets sent out into the forest, like he has that epic stare down with Milchek, where they're just face to face, giving each other daggers, both with fantastic mustaches. I mean, that was quite the stare down.
Sure. My question for you, is Irv done? Like, he's certainly going to stay in the show. I don't think you, like, send John Turturro packing, but is he now an outie, like, rebel at this point? Or is he branch transfer? Is he clean slate wiped, and then they start over with him?
It's a good question. I mean, what Milchek kind of poetically says at the end, it's like, it'll be like you never existed, may Kyr's mercy follow you into the eternal dark. So I don't know. Like, I feel like he's too cool of a character to replace entirely. I think we'll definitely still get outie version of him. It's just maybe, are they going to clean slate him, bring him back like nothing happened, but he's going to have no memories of this team. Like, he's essentially going to wake back up on that conference room table again and start from scratch. Like, maybe that's what they'll do.
Yeah.
Or maybe he'll take over Bert's position at O&D. That's true.
They could just put him in a different spot.
Mm-hmm.
I I truly enjoyed this episode. It started slow. I was a little bit worried that we were just like killing time. I'm a little bit confused as to how other episodes are affected by this episode, just in terms of like Mark's reintegration. The Helena reveal was cool. I hate that you're justified in your theories. So I enjoyed this. I enjoyed having him out of the office, and this is just kind of like eerie, and I'm not going to say I was scared at any point, but give all of the flowers to Milch and that actor. He did a fabulous job, and then old Irv and John Turturro were wonderful. So
yeah, incredible acting. I'm with you though. Like I love the change of scenery for our any characters. I think that was a cool little twist and change in the dynamics that they have. But man, they answered the Helena question, but they threw quite a bit at us that I'm very interested to see how this is going to translate back into the Severed Floor.
Right. You should show up at the Severed Floor the next day and you're like, hey, wasn't it weird when we were out in the middle of the tundra? Like, what's going on here? And then they were only so far as to be, I guess, and time doesn't matter because Milchek's lied before, but he does make a comment about a 2-day trip. So if they would have had to physically get them somewhere, I don't know. I'm starting to feel like it's kind of like the Matrix thing where they can just download them into a different environment. But I could be wrong. I don't know.
I mean, they have chips, like I said in the beginning, they have chips in their head. So, and they clearly have a bunch of these protocols or whatever that they can, or contingencies they can do for these characters. So, sky's the limit.
Yep. I believe the sky is the limit, Tom. That's something you've always said. All right. For those of you that are still with us and still enjoying this show, which we are definitely doing, you can reach us at teambingepodcast@gmail.com. We appreciate your messages, even when they hurt our feelings. Tom handles the social. Tom told me to handle Twitter for a while, and then I scrolled through it, and I immediately deleted that app because the world is a strange place. And honestly, it frightened me. It gave me woe, no frolic, but just dread, and then malice, and then I deleted it.
Understandable.
So, Tom, what did I miss?
Yeah, follow us on the other socials, Blue Sky, Twitter if you dare, or X, I guess, Threads, Instagram. Shout out to Ike Parks, a listener of the pod that's been sending us some fun things through Instagram, some different like theory videos and stuff. It's always kind of fun to do a little bit of deeper dives. And let us know what you think of the show, man. It's been a ride, to say the least, and I'm still enjoying it. But man, I hope we get some more answers here pretty quick.
Oh yeah, whoever's sending Tom theory crafting stuff, he then filters that to me, and it makes my day weird. Tom sent me something about like Jenna Fisher from The Office being dressed exactly like Dylan's wife when she visits him in the like.
She's Gretchen.
And I don't. What am I supposed to do with that information, Tom? Like, I gotta live my life, man. Like, is this an Office spinoff? Is this because they're in an office and Michael Scott and them were in an office?
Sure.
What do I? I've got children to raise. I can't be mixing the Office and Severance together. So
that's
confusing.
fair. I mean, there are loads of Parks and Rec references, or like references that you could try to bring into Parks and Rec, which are a lot of fun with Adam Scott's run on that show.
Sure.
So I'm sure this is not the last of it.
All right. Well, I look forward to episode 5. I'm enjoying it immensely. So for Team Binge, I have been Julian.
And I have been Tom. Till next week, everybody.